What is good, everybody? Welcome back to the Sneaker History Podcast. My name is Nick Engvall, and today I've got a very special guest. Kind of been a in the making thing. I got sick a few weeks back, and we weren't able to make this happen before the elections. But I was really excited to have this conversation and meet this gentleman, at least virtually here. So I wanted to share this conversation with the audience and kind of talk about something that you all know that I'm really passionate about. Is kind of bringing sneakers into the normal everyday life and using it as a way to connect with people. So I want to introduce Zellnor Myrie. He's a congressman from New York. Welcome to the show, Zellnor. Thanks for coming on with me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
I'm very, very excited. I get to do a lot of interviews and podcasts and media stuff. Rarely do I get to speak about something that I'm truly passionate about, and that's kicks. And so thank you for having me, Nick. Appreciate you.
Of course. Yeah, I kind of figured that might be the case. Like you get to deal with all the hot fire, it's tough questions every day in and day out. So I'm glad that we can kind of be a little break from that for you, but hopefully also kind of tie this into what you've been doing, because just in the little bit that I've done researching you and seeing what you've done, it's like, this is a man that's doing the things that I would be doing if I was in his position. So really admire that. And I guess let's start out by giving people a little bit of background about, what you do now, and then we'll get into a little bit of the sneaker conversation.
Yeah, so I serve in the state Senate in New York. Yeah. So it is the upper house of the state legislature here in New York State, and I represent Central Brooklyn, which is where I was born and raised. I went to elementary school in Crown Heights. I like to tell the story of the first time I got on the bus when I was in first grade, and I thought I was grown, taking the bus down Empire Boulevard. And my mom told me years later that she was driving behind the bus to make sure that I was safe. But I'm a city kid, taking public transit. Went to high school at Brooklyn Tech. And then went to Fordham for undergrad and Cornell for law school. But I ran for the state Senate in 2018. I've been serving there since then. I chair the elections committee. So that is, of course, preeminently on a lot of people's minds. But we've done a lot of things in that space. I've been able to pass legislation around affordable housing. I've done stuff around education, done things around gun safety, and of course around elections and protecting our democracy. And I have thrown my hat into the ring to run for mayor of this great city, the city that I was born and raised in the same city that my parents came to close to 50 years ago. They were both immigrants from Costa Rica. They both worked in factories here in Brooklyn. And my sneakerhead origin story comes from my mom, which I'm sure we're going to get into later. But they're the reasons that I'm here. And that same opportunity that they came to the city for, I'm trying to provide for other folks coming in after me. And so I'm really glad to be with you here today.
Yeah, man, that's a beautiful thing. So before we get into the origin story of your sneakers, we do a thing on our show called Rockin' and Coppin', and you can imagine what that is. But for the audience, this is really kind of like the last shoe you either wore or are wearing now, and then kind of the shoe that you either just picked up or a shoe that you're looking at picking up. So when I say Rockin' and Coppin', what comes to mind for you?
So I currently have on some Sabrina Ionescu 2s,
Nice.
and they are the Olympic reds that she rocked for the Olympics. But I'm a big New York Liberty fan. For those of you who may tragically not be aware, the New York Liberty won the championship not too long ago. I was at Game 5, overtime, had the towel over my head, stressed out. My wife is looking at me like, what's going on? And so I've been a big fan of the team, but obviously a fan of Sabrina's. And so I'm wearing the Sabrina 2s right now. I actually brought them to one of the games that I went to. I was trying to get her to sign it. So Sabrina, if you're listening to this, just know that I'm still trying to get a signed pair, but have been a big supporter of the team and the kicks themselves. I have worn them with my suits, as you see me dressed now, and everyone has complimented them, sneakerhead and non-sneakerhead alike, because they pop. And I really like that, contrast of being able to wear some dark colors, but with a bright red that pops.
Yeah, definitely. What's a recent shoe that you picked up or something that you're looking at kind of, moving forward? There's, always lots of news out there, but what do you focus on, or what catches your attention?
Yeah, so I'm really trying to, and this is, I guess, for a lot of us who grew up admiring sneakers and weren't in a position to get them back then, and then you see them come on the rebound. I really want the DTs, the Deion Sanders. And I haven't been able to cop them. I don't think they're like terribly hard to get. I just haven't gotten around to it. But those are a pair that I remember being younger, and anybody that had those, I thought they were like the man, like you know.
Yeah.
And so those are some drops that have come through this year that I'm really trying to go after.
Yeah, definitely. That's iconic. You know, it's one of those shoes. I think as a kid, for me too, it was like it looks so different. You know, like compared to everything else that you saw a lot of. You know. And not that, you know, like I didn't love, you know, the Jordans and all that stuff, but like I was always the guy that kind of, you know, everybody had Bulls colors Jordans. So my favorite Jordans, you know, I never got them as a kid, but military fours and true blues, it was like I wanted the different ones that I didn't see as much, you know, so I can relate to that totally.
Yeah.
How let's talk about your origin story in sneakers. How did you, you know, kind of get into the sneakerhead aspect of it?
Yeah, and you know, we talking about Jordans and not being able to have them when I was younger. I remember, so you know, I came from a real working class family. As I mentioned, both of my parents worked in factories when they got to this country, and then my mom became a small business owner and then a nurse, and my pops was a special education teacher in the Bronx. My mom and my dad split when I was young, so I spent most of my childhood with my mom in Brooklyn, and I remember the first time I asked my mom for a pair of Jordans. This is in elementary school. And my mom looked at me and laughed and said, there is no way that I'm going to spend that amount of money on a pair of sneakers. All these big corporations are thieves. They should be investing in our schools. I got the lecture that I'm sure you are familiar with. And so she said, you will get your first pair of Jordans when you get a job. And I remember the first job I got, I worked for summer youth employment, and a lot of the city kids know SYEP. And I didn't get a pair of Jordans. This is slightly embarrassing, but remember when we used to wear Diesel sneakers?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And I remember seeing somebody with them on, and that was all I could like really afford at the time. And so I got a pair of Diesel sneakers, which I have since discarded. But when I got my first real job at Old Navy, I was a denim expert at Old Navy, and I remember getting my first pair of J's, and that's when it really started. You know, I would see people in high school. There was a friend of mine, a dude named Steve, that was so fresh, fresh, and every pair. Worked at Foot Locker, and for those of us who were into it, like the dream was to have the referee shirt so you could get the discount. And I wanted to be down so bad. You know, I was looking at fake Jordans. That was like the height of the variant. You know how that goes. I'm trying to fit in. You know, I just grew to love the culture as I started to actually figure out what was in my price point, what I could afford, what I was willing to wait online for. One of my tragic stories was waiting for the Great Fives when they were first retroed. And I thought, all right, let me get out of the city. I'm going to go to Cross County Mall in Westchester because I think it's going to be less crazy. And so I take the first bus out there. It's real early, you know, it's probably like 4:00 in the morning. And of course, there's already a line. And we come up with a whole arrangement. It's like 6 of us. We say, okay, we're going to cut this paper. You came first, you came second, da-da-da. We got a whole strategy. The second bus came, mad people get off the bus, and all of the order is lost. And so now people are fighting, people are yelling at each other, the cops are called, all sorts of this. And so I'm in the like cut, like I'm still gonna get my my J's. And I like walk up to the line to the Foot Locker employee, and I'm like, listen, I've been here since 4:00 in the morning. I need to get my sneakers. And so I get them. And I vow never, ever, ever to wait online again. And of course, I reneged on that, and we can talk about some of that stuff. But that's the basis of the origin story is, you know, these are things that I had wanted. And, you know, the truth that there's similarities between sneakers, and this is what you do for the culture. They tell a story about the person. they are an instrument to reflect something that you can see immediately. You don't hear anything, but you can see a story in that. And politics is a similar thing. It's about telling stories about who we are as a people. And I have been drawn to sneakers because of what they signify, particularly when we don't have as much leeway on fashion for men. You're able to express some of that flair in what you wear on your feet. And I've just remained in love with the culture ever since.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. I mean, I share such a similar story, with, same, my mom had almost word for word the same response the first time I asked for Jordans. And, first job, I did buy a pair of the charcoal nines.
Yes.
Was my first, but it was like, I basically did like landscaping, and then my first job before that was umpiring Little League games, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
And so like I had those two jobs for the full summer, and the charcoal nines were on sale. And it was like I had they were like 60, like 70 and some change after tax. And I had like just barely enough to get them. And it was like, I felt like I felt like I had accomplished everything I needed to in life at, 14, 15 years old. It was like, this is it. This is how it works. I felt so good about it. And like you, I have similar experiences, lineups where you're just like, what am I doing here? Like it's just, I'm never doing this again. And then, so I think my favorite part about sneakers is like, no matter how many times I'm like, okay, I'm going to slow down. I'm going to back off. I'm going to, focus on other things. Somebody calls and says, hey, you want to go get these? Or, hey, I got these, or I know somebody that has these. And next thing you know, you're right back in the mix. You're spending a bunch of time scrolling on Instagram now. And, back in the day, you're going through message boards and, standing outside and talking to all the guys that are working at those Foot Lockers just to like know what's coming and have those relationships. So I love that you're talking about that in politics too, because those stories to me is like, it's really just like finding all these people and having people on the show and letting them tell those stories too, because like just recently we had a guy on who's basically collected only Puma for the past like 15, 20 years. And like, it's such a unique angle in this space, but it's like, you being from New York know how like Clyde Frazier has, like he is the man, like he has such exactly what you said. He was the guy that did have the self-expression beyond the sneakers, but then the sneakers took on a life of their own. And, so I love what you're saying about that. And I think, kind of that leads me into one of my next questions is like, I read about your Sneakerhead Day. So talk a little bit about that and like, I guess how you've navigated that, because not only is there just I think a little hesitancy or not hesitancy, there's a little bit of a standardization for the way men dress, and then sneakers being that one thing that we express ourselves with. But beyond that, like, I'm assuming that politics and having to wear the suit and the dress codes that are, whether they're implied or really exist, are things you also have to think about and like, in navigating as you're going through this, political journey that you're on.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate this question because it speaks to a lot of people bringing their authentic selves to whatever it is that they're doing. So we actually have a literal dress code in the state Senate for men walking into the chamber. Even if you're not a senator, you have to have a jacket on. That is in the rule books. And so there is a dress code on what you have to wear on top, on bottom, but there isn't, at least in statute and code, dress code on what you wear on your feet. But traditionally, people have, it's hard bottom central, right? And so, everyone's wearing shoes. So I remember during COVID, we still had to come up during the legislative session. And so, of course, we were all masked up. We were all suited up. But I was looking very reckless because I hadn't gone to the barber because it was, like we were all all inside, right? And so I remember I had a full grown beard. My hair was looking crazy. And I was like, if I'm going to have to show up and still like wear a suit and look crazy, I'm going to at least be comfortable and I'm not going to be in no hard bottoms. So I remember the first time I walked into the Senate chamber, during COVID, I had the DMP sixes on, and nobody stopped me. I walked in and it was regular and there was nothing. And frankly, I have not stopped wearing my sneakers in the chamber since then. And then I started switching it up. And the DMPs, they're black and they have a little bit of gold, so they can like look a little shoe-like. But I started to experiment and get, I've thrown on some dunks. They're doing some other threes that were white, like really playing around with it. And other people started picking up. I have a close friend of mine in the state Senate, brother from the Bronx named Senator Jamal Bailey, who's also a sneakerhead, who, has been, wearing sneakers and doing the thing. And so we started wearing more stuff and, showing out the catalog, and other people started showing out the catalog as well. So I thought, hold on, why don't we have a day where everybody wears sneakers and we're intentional, and not just the senators, the staff people, the people that clean the building, everybody in the state legislature, in the state capitol, come with your stuff on. And so a couple of years ago, I introduced a resolution to make it Sneaker Day in New York. And let me tell you something, man. We introduced that legislation at the end of the session when things are at a fever pitch. So we're talking about real important issues that matter to all New Yorkers. This is like drag down fighting, blood on the walls. You know how politics can be. I introduced that resolution. We had so many Republicans and Democrats speaking in unity about what sneakers meant to them. It was one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had. And people getting emotional talking about what sneakers meant to them, whether it was from a fashion standpoint, whether it was from an athletic standpoint. And man, we had Republicans in Yeezys. We had all sorts of like every brand. We had people that weren't really showing out on style, just on comfort. And they're like, why don't I do this every single day? Like, this feels good to me. And that was a real important moment, I think, not just for me as a sneakerhead, but really for the culture, and to demonstrate that this goes beyond any political affiliation. This goes beyond any age range. I mean, we had people bringing out heat. Some of the younger people behind me, I was seeing stuff like, I don't even know how you can afford. You had some dunkles on, like, okay. People were really showing out, and that made me really excited. So that's a tradition that we have kept going. I want to expand it. I want us to do something in the schools. I want people to feel like they can partake in this, even if they don't have the means to get, whatever the latest thing is, because it's really about your comfort, about expressing who you are. And it shows me how long, how far along we are with the sneaker culture.
Yeah, man. Well, and it's also representative, I think, on a whole different level, seeing you out there, amongst the people, when you're doing press conferences and you're wearing something like it's more real to me that you're moving about the city in sneakers. You're not going to wear hard bottoms and be going door to door talking to the people. I do think that there's like a really interesting dynamic and one of the other questions I wanted to ask you about, or have you at least touch on, is just that dynamic of age, right? Because we definitely are way more accepting, when I started working, in the sneaker world, like I interviewed and still interviewed in a shirt and tie, a jacket and hard bottoms, but I was interviewing for jobs that were, essentially selling sneakers or creating content around sneakers or marketing or whatever that is. And over time, I came from doing sales for, big companies like AT&T and stuff like that before I got into the sneaker world. And then, over time, I really, really try to focus on my goal is to work with people that understand that I love wearing my Giants hat. I love wearing sneakers, I kind of have that as the almost I love getting dressed up too, but that is my daily comfort. You're going to get the best work out of me as well, I think. And I think we're kind of moving into a place where that is more acceptable. And these types of things are going to spearhead that, making, sneakers normal across so many different places. But what have you kind of seen in that regard on the age difference thing? Because I do think a lot of the rules that we have in place for the younger generation feel like they just are not relevant to them, because we don't wear the same things. We don't even have the same kind of mentality of our parents or grandparents. Not that we don't figure out how to get along and learn from them and all those things, but there's definitely a drastic difference in the way we approach, our regular life in a fashion sense or in a daily, living sense.
Yeah, no, there is most certainly. And I think with a lot of things, as you're pointing out, a generational difference in how we approach life, and things that were good for one generation may not necessarily be good for the next. And there's also, things that prior generations fought for that we take for granted now that we would not have had if they didn't break some barriers and say, let me do something a little different. And I think with sneakers, we're doing some of that for the next generation. Some of us, and I think we're in the same age band, remember when being a sneakerhead was very subculture. It wasn't mainstream. It wasn't, people would sort of look at you and be like, why are you into this? And why would you wait online for this? And why, and now we have, we have podcasts now that are fully dedicated to appreciating the culture. And that's because there were people that had to break through and do that. And I think we're doing the same thing for the folks coming behind us. But there also have been some of my colleagues, I'm thinking of one who was a little older than us, who showed up to the chamber with some SpongeBob Kyries on. And it was, and he got them from one of his younger relatives who said, I'm going to buy this for you. You probably have no idea what this is. And he was so happy to come and show me that he had the SpongeBob Kyries on. And I thought that that's a cross-generational influence, both in both directions, showing that you can sort of be expressive on one end and then pave the way for some others. And so I'm excited about what it means. Part of what you were talking about about what it means for regular people to see you dressed this way. I went to the White House for an event on gun safety, and I had my cool gray 11s on. And these are one of those items that I couldn't get back when they first came out, and that I was able to get on the retro. And I posted a picture of it, and I was walking on the block one day in the district, and one of the guys came up to me and he said, "Yo, I saw you had cool grays on at the White House. I've never seen a politician do anything like that." And it meant so much to him and resonated. And meanwhile, I'm doing it because that's, this is how I dress. This is what I do now. Yeah. But it has an impact because people have not seen it done before. And that is the really exciting part about this, that we get to show that you can be yourself and you can be in rooms that you don't think you can be in. You can hit markers of success that you may have not thought, but you don't have to leave who you are behind. You could take who you are with you into that space. And that's what I'm hoping to continue to do and inspire.
Yeah, man, that's so cool. I mean, it gave me goosebumps when you said that, because that is such a relatable emotion for anybody that cares about sneakers, and I think, even going back to you talking about wearing the Sabrinas, I think we all have, I'm from Sacramento originally. So we lost the Monarchs, but we got a championship, you know, and the WNBA has obviously gone through a lot in the 20, 30 years, but that to me, there's so much, when I am, when I'll throw on one of the old tees or something like that, it's very similar to that, where it's oh, you were around and you remember that. And the amount of just let your guard down, let's have a conversation is what I love, specifically about sneakers, but sports and all types of different culture that we kind of tie into the sneakerhead thing. But it's the easiest way to start a conversation, and I know that we have a lot of, you probably know this more than anybody, being on the political side, because that's kind of what you have to do, I assume, as a politician, is learn how to have conversations with people you might not normally have conversations with. But for for the consumer side and like just the, that, I don't know, normal is not the right word, but just like the average person, we're in this time where we're so isolated coming out of COVID, and in the political climate and all of this stuff where like, it's inspiring to me to see you doing this and hear you doing this and hear about it, because it's really what I want to try to continue to do with this show and with all the things I do in the business, to like really kind of just continue to remember that like we're so similar in so many ways. We have so many shared stories, but like really it's a pair of cool gray 11s that like everybody can look at that and be like, oh man. And then seeing you do it at the White House, it's like, that's exactly what we want to see, like we want to see more of that representation for our little, what we feel like is our little niche sneakerhead community, which is obviously not at this point, because we're, you walk anywhere in the city and you're seeing, dozens of crazy shoes at this point. But I guess like, how do you look at that in terms of, just being out there, like, I guess representing, kind of a group that, especially in politics, probably feels a little underrepresented, like as sneakerheads.
Yeah, this is, it's in part why I wanted to do the resolution and to have it become a part of the conversation. I had colleagues who were like, I'm shopping for sneaker day. And I was like, okay, so great. Cool. Like that's amazing. And they're like, well, I don't know exactly what to get. Like, what do you, and I'm like, the whole point is that you get whatever you want and you express yourself however you want. And, for the inaugural sneaker day, me and Senator Bailey, we bought the majority leader, Andrea Stewart Cousins. She is the first woman majority leader in the state Senate's 200-year history, first Black woman to do it. And she always wears these beautiful scarves. And it's like incredibly fashionable. And we said, well, what can we get her for sneaker day that could sort of speak to everybody? And we got her some white Uptowns, like just a regular pair, but they were crisp, as you know. And seeing her rock those for sneaker day was like, wow, like this is because white ups are one of those utility sneakers that can both be, a very fresh compliment, or they could look raggedy. And it goes the whole spectrum because they're a useful sneaker. And it's like, I think there's some sneakers that are stepping into that white up space, like the Panda Dunks that like you see, like that are just like, you see people on the train in suits with pandas on, and you see tourists from Asia with pandas on. You see the bodega guy with pandas on. And that showing the commonality, the thread that all of us can share, that to me is one of the most powerful things about our sneaker culture making its way into the mainstream. And, again, it's not unlike politics, where my job is to show us the things that we have in common and show that they are much more in volume and quality than the differences that we have. And when we're coming together as much as we can, particularly in these times, we're able to cut through a lot of the noise and see our humanity in each other. It's like, look, if you got something dope on, who cares where you're from, what your political party is, it's just like, yo, nah, that's what's up. Those are, and we, for us, the sneakerhead appreciation is one thing, right? Because you can, like, if you tell me something and you're like, nah, Z, you got that, like that means the world to me. But it's also like an older woman. I was walking down the street one day, clearly not a sneakerhead, clearly not whatever. And she was like, I love those shoes. And like, that's also a form of satisfaction because, again, it shows that there's just a humanity and appreciation. It's the same way that when we look at a beautiful piece of art, or when we look out into the ocean, or we look out into nature and we say, wow, that's amazing. All of us feel that. We all know that. And I think, on a much smaller scale, but important nonetheless, that's how we feel about sneakers and people expressing themselves. So that's something that I really love about the culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself, man. I 100% agree. So let's shift a little bit. how did you get into politics? Like, what did that, where did that come about for you?
Yeah, so I actually so I went to Fordham for undergrad. I was a communications and journalism major. So I actually covered the basketball team for my school
Nice.
paper. Yeah. And I thought I was going to be on Sports Center, ESPN. I thought I was going to be this big sportscaster. And then I took a trip when I graduated to South Africa. I took a community service trip, and it changed my worldview on what I wanted to do with my life. And so I came back, I started volunteering for the local community board, and I was doing all the little stuff that nobody wanted to do. I'm like checking the cracks in the sidewalks. I'm making sure stoplights are working, doing very basic stuff on a volunteer basis. And the chair of that community board ended up becoming a chief of staff for someone on the city council. And he said, "Zeke, you want to come intern for us?" I said, "Sure." This was the Great Recession. So I did not have a job, and was also trying to look to see how I could serve. I ended up being in this office, became the legislative director, the press director, and learned how the operation worked. I eventually left that to go back to grad school. I got my master's in urban studies. I said, I'm not going to do politics. It's too dirty. These people aren't invested in people. Never again. I'll figure out how to serve some other way. I go to law school, and then I do a lot of public interest stuff in law school. I did the Cornell Legal Aid. I did a lot of work teaching in our prisons upstate New York, where I saw up close what the impact of the system was on people. And then I worked for a law firm coming out of law school. And then there was a big national election where I looked inside and said, what am I doing to serve the community I was born and raised in? I looked at the problems that our community was faced with. I grew up in a rent stabilized apartment, and our rent stabilization laws were controlled by Albany, which is where our capital is. I looked at the future of public safety. I grew up in neighborhoods that were plagued by gun violence. A lot of those laws were controlled by Albany. I thought about the climate and how things were changing and what we were doing, again, controlled by Albany. And so I said, we got to step up in this moment. I'm going to run for state senate. And everybody told me, you're too young. You're not going to have the money to do it. You're running against a big machine, people who have done this for many years. And I said, I got to stand up for my community. I would not be who I am today if this community didn't invest in me. I went to after school programs that kept me off the street. I went to a public school that gave me a world-class education. How could I not fight for that same opportunity for the people coming behind me? So we stepped up, we ran, we won. And since being in the Senate, we've been doing a lot of good work. But that's the abbreviated version of how we ended up in politics.
That's awesome, man. I mean, it's so inspiring to hear that, because I feel like, we're in a time where a lot of, younger, I'll use the term younger loosely and consider us both in there still. But,
still.
We definitely feel a lot of mixed feelings about what's been going on. And, like you said, the naysayers that were saying you're going against the machine, how would you, I guess, maybe what kind of advice would you have for like the sneaker enthusiasts that are listening to this right now that have had that thought of like, getting involved in politics, giving back to the community, to me, that's something I would love to see more people get inspired to be a part of. But at the same time, it's heavy right now. The political climate is very, heavy for a lot of people. So any words of advice for that, like next generation?
Yeah, so I would say one, and I got to give a shout out to the sneaker company Common Enemy, which has used actual sneaker production as a measure of social justice and dedicates a portion of what they make to getting healthcare to people and ensuring that we're giving opportunity to folks. I have a pair of their first model, Common Enemies, and the founder is a Brooklyn guy, and so want to shout them out. So if you're a sneakerhead, that's cool, and you want to figure out ways to give, there are opportunities right in your lane. But more broadly, I think there is something in us, the folks that like sneakers, that like we like being different. There is something special about having a pair that not everybody is wearing. There's something about walking into a room with some OGs that people are going to be like, oh, wow, and also like getting, different colors, things that pop that may not be the norm. That same spirit in you to be different, to have something that not everyone else has, you can use that same spirit to help people, because the only people that change the world are the folks that say, let me be different from the rest and let me see how I can make life better. So you could take that same courage, that same style, that same swag, you can bring that into this space and say, how can I do politics a little different than what it has been done like in the past? And, for me at the time, part of that was how young I was. But it's not just that, right? Like you got to stand up for things that oftentimes are not easy to stand up for, and things that everyone recognizes are wrong, but people just have not had the courage to do. And so I would encourage you in any little space, and that doesn't mean you have to run for office, though you should run for office. It means that any opportunity you have to do something a little different, to step up and say something for somebody else who couldn't say it, take that opportunity. Use your own spaces, because if you don't do it, no one else is going to do it. If you don't rock those, exclusives, then like the people who are interested in you not being successful, they're going to do it. And so you got to step up in this moment and use that same spirit to make some change.
Yeah, man, I love that. I mean, we intro our show and outro our show by telling people to, suggesting to people that they tell someone that they like their kicks today, because you never know how far that compliment is going to take you. And, for me, it's established, long-term relationship with my girl, some of my best friends, like experiences that I could not even fathom just by being a nerd about sneakers and sharing that with people, So I guess like, a little bit maybe tougher of a question. How do you deal with kind of the challenges of, I don't want to call it the wins and losses of what you do, but obviously, we've talked a lot about your success in like bringing the sneaker thing along with you and kind of breaking down some of the status quo there. But like, obviously you probably go through a lot of things where you're pushing for change to happen and it doesn't happen. How do you deal with that? And like, what would be your advice for kind of the average person that's out there experiencing those things as a voter?
Yeah. So I'd say first, and I try to share this in every space that I'm in, that if you are taking care of your mental health on a regular, consistent basis, then those peaks and those valleys are going to be much easier to deal with. And so I always encourage people, please take care of your mental health. And for some people that looks like therapy. I'm in therapy. I make it my I ensure to tell people that so that you can feel comfortable talking about it. But that's not it for everybody. There are other things that people go to and can use. Make sure you are taking care of your mental health, because here's the thing, and certainly social media is exemplary of this. You only see people's highlights. You only see people's peaks. They're only talking about the good things that they have done, but you cannot get to a peak. It defies the laws of physics without going through the valley. You have to climb up. You eventually have to be down. And that's what life is. It is a combination of both of those things. And so talk about your valleys too. Talk about your failures. And for me, I've tried to change a lot of things in this system. I have backed candidates that have lost. I have been discouraged by the system not moving fast enough, by seeing people struggle and not being able to fix it. I've had my constituents not be ashamed to come to me and say, why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? Why haven't you fixed this? But oftentimes in those particular instances, much like when you're trying to get something on the sneakers app and it says, sorry, you did not get it. Like, you got to resolve that you'll get the next time. You'll get it on the next wave. And there will be a next time. And that is what has helped me get through some of the challenges is to say, look, I might not have gotten the win here, but I have made progress, and it's an opportunity for me to be even better the next time. And so don't get discouraged, right? We don't get every pair that we want, but you get the pairs that you need. And that's what has given me solace in some of my valleys.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. All right, so I'm gonna hit you with the toughest question of the conversation. What's your favorite pair? Or let's say what's your favorite 3 pairs? What are the 3 favorite pairs that come to mind? Because that gives you a little bit of leeway, and I can get a little bit more of your style preferences out of that for the audience.
Yes. Okay. All right. That does give me some more leeway. Okay. So, Space Jam 11s, to me, clean, classic, tied to childhood memories. Like that is definitely up there. I had, this is a little embarrassing because I can't find them and they're in storage somewhere. I had the Huff tie-dye Nike SB highs. And because I knew I was coming on to your podcast, I went to go check how much they were going for on GOAT. And they're like $2,000, which is crazy.
Yep.
But I just loved everything about how it popped, how different it was. And of course, because SBs, for me, at least are really comfortable. So I'm going to put them in the category. And like, I don't want to make this like a completely Nike thing. So I'm going to step outside of the Nike space for a second. And these are recent. I don't know if you saw the Jetson Crocs that released.
Oh, yeah.
I see it.
Yep.
And like that, I was, people on my staff were laughing at me for like being like, yo, actually, I got to go pick these up because they were, to me, again, reminiscent of my childhood, but also something that was comfort. And they just like looked dope and had, little, how these things look. So I'd say that I'd put those 3 forward for consideration. But you know how this is. It's like picking your favorite kids. That you
Absolutely.
you love them each in a different way.
Yeah, and I think that the fun part about that question is that it can change. Like you said, Space Jam 11s. I think depending on your age, you have that nostalgia, you have that core childhood memory connected to them. But then there's so many things that come out, and there's so many artists and creative folks that are doing so many just cool things in the world of sneakers that, can shift depending on the day of the week almost for all of us, so can totally relate.
Yeah.
So I guess like last but not least, let's let everybody know how they can find you outside of this show, how they can support any of those things that you want to get out there to the sneaker community.
Yeah. So again, this has been just really dope and exciting to talk about. And I would encourage everybody to check me out at Zellnor.nyc. That's ZELLNOR.NYC. That's our campaign website. As I mentioned, I'm running for mayor of New York City. This is a city that I love. This is a city who has made me who I am. And it's a city that, whether you're a sneakerhead or not, you should be able to live, you should be able to afford, and you should be able to prosper in. And we need folks fighting for elevation of all of us, for those opportunities. And that's what I'm fighting for. So check me out at Zellnor.nyc. There are ways for you to support what we're doing right on the website. And I think I have my Cool Grays on in the launch video. So if you need to get anybody to hooked in on that, you can say, check out this dude running for mayor in Cool Grays.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. I'll wrap here, and then if I could get just a couple minutes to kind of let it roll before you sign off. But thank you everybody for tuning in, for watching or listening wherever you're taking this in. Make sure you leave a comment, make sure you support, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Peace.